This presentation is an introduction to the reflexes of the body. By definition, a reflex is a rapid, automatic, and predictable response to a stimulus. It wouldn't be helpful if the patellar reflex caused the leg to kick out in some people, but in others caused the leg to bend farther back. That's what I mean by predictable. Reflexes may or may not involve interneurons. Remember that interneurons are located between a sensory and motor neuron. If they are present, they form what are called neuronal pools, or a group of interconnected neurons. These pools can be arranged in several different patterns or circuits: divergence, convergence, parallel processing, serial processing, and reverberation. Divergence means that information is spread from one neuron to several neurons. Convergence is the opposite, where several neurons synapse on one postsynaptic neuron. In parallel processing, several neurons process the same information at the same time. This allows several responses to occur at once. In serial processing, information is relayed from one neuron to another one neuron. Think about the term serial number on a piece of equipment. The numbers are in order of production. Here in the nervous system, the information is passed along in a specific order, one neuron to another. In reverberation, there is a loop formed in the circuit. It usually starts with a serial processing pattern, then a branch goes back to one of the first interneurons and starts the stimulus over and over again. The path information takes during a reflex is called a reflex arc. There are several steps or components to this arc. It all starts with a sensory receptor, which is attached to a sensory neuron. The information then travels through an information processing center, which is usually the central nervous system, then passes out through a motor neuron, ending with an effector. I think the effector as what effect is this going to have? In the patellar reflex example, the effector is the muscles of the quadriceps, because the effect of this reflex is knee extension. So in this picture, we see all of these components of a reflex arc. It starts with a stimulus at the receptor, and the receptor, the information travels along a sensory neuron. Then here we have an interneuron. The spinal cord is our processing center. Then we have a motor neuron, and the muscles would be the effector. Reflexes can be classified based on a few different criteria: the time of development, the nature of the response, the complexity of the circuit, and the processing site. Reflexes based on time of development are either innate or acquired. Innate reflexes are those that are present in birth, and acquired reflexes are learned reflexes that develop after birth. Some innate reflexes include the suckling reflex or the withdrawal from pain reflex. Acquired reflexes include things like keeping your balance while riding a bike, or hitting the brakes when something runs in front of a car. Reflexes based on the nature of the response are either somatic or visceral. A somatic reflex always involves skeletal muscles, like the patellar reflex, and a visceral reflex involves smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. Reflexes can vary in their complexity. A monosynaptic reflex is the simplest and only involves the sensory and motor neuron, no interneurons. That means that there is only one synapse in the reflex arc. A polysynaptic reflex involves at least one interneuron, sometimes many. The last criteria is the processing site. This means where does the information processing take place. For spinal reflexes, the information processing takes place in the spinal cord. In cranial reflexes, the processing takes place in nuclei of the brain. Now let's discuss a few specific reflex examples. The first type is the stretch reflex. This is a monosynaptic reflex, meaning no interneurons, and it regulates the skeletal muscle length, making it a somatic reflex. Many of these reflexes are postural, seen on the posterior side of the body. The best known example of this stretch reflex is the patellar reflex. Here we see the components of the reflex arc for a typical stretch reflex, or here shown, the patellar reflex. The receptor is called a muscle spindle, and in the patellar reflex is located in the quadriceps muscle. The sensory neuron carries the information to the spinal cord, where it synapses directly onto a motor neuron. The effector is the quadriceps muscle, and it causes them to contract. So we have the muscle spindle, receptor, the sensory neuron, here's the information processing, directly to a motor neuron, and then the effector is again the muscle of the quadriceps, and that will cause contraction of the quadriceps and extension of the knee. Another type of somatic reflex is the withdrawal reflex. This type of reflex is designed to move a body part away from a stimulus, usually a painful one. If the body part is a limb, it is called a flexor reflex. This is a polysynaptic reflex, so it uses many different neuronal pools, and the response may vary depending on the type of stimulus involved and the number of neuronal pools activated. A flexor reflex causes the muscles to flex away from the painful stimulus, while at the same time sending a signal to relax the extensors of that same limb. This is a process called reciprocal inhibition. In the withdrawal reflex, the receptors are usually pain receptors, and the signal is carried to the spinal cord over a sensory neuron. In the spinal cord, many spinal segments are involved through the use of interneurons. Then information is carried away from the spinal cord over the motor neuron, or neurons. There are usually at least 2 motor neurons, one to the flexors and one to the extensors, plus others that go to different segments of the spinal cord. So we have our painful stimulus, we have pain receptors, the sensory neuron. This white is an interneuron, and you can see it goes to at least 1, 2, possibly 3 other neurons. And then we have at least 2 effector neurons coming out. We have the flexors are stimulated so that you move your hand away, and then we have the extensors are being inhibited through that reciprocal inhibition. Another response that can be involved in the withdrawal reflex is the crossed extensor reflex. Say the painful stimulus is a tack that you stepped on, or a kid's toy. The flexor response and the reciprocal inhibition is activated on the same side as the stimulus. This side is called the ipsilateral side. But to keep you upright as you lift your foot, the extensors on the opposite or contralateral side are activated, and flexors are inhibited. So here we have that painful stimulus. So we have all of our components of the reflex arc. You've got your pain receptors, our sensory neuron, and then we go through several different components. We have an interneuron here and several motor neurons. On the same side, the ipsilateral side, you're going to have your flexors. Knee flexors are going to be stimulated, and extensors are going to be inhibited. And then on this side, you're going to have your extensors stimulated and your flexors are going to be inhibited. Most of the complex movements we make, such as walking and running, involve several polysynaptic reflexes. Some characteristics of all polysynaptic reflexes include they all involve neuronal pools, otherwise it wouldn't be called a polysynaptic reflex. They are intersegmental, meaning they involve more than one segment of the spinal cord. They involve reciprocal inhibition, as seen in the flexor and crossed extensor reflexes. They have reverberating circuits, so that the response is maintained for a period of time even after the stimulus has faded. And polysynaptic reflexes can involve several reflexes, again as seen in the withdrawal and crossed extensor reflexes. While most reflexes happen as predicted, recall the definition of a reflex, the results can be either inhibited or facilitated. Inhibition means the reflex is harder to elicit. For example, having the quadriceps already contracted will reduce the response of the patellar reflex. Facilitation, or reinforcement, will exaggerate or overemphasize a response. For example, the Gendrazic maneuver will produce a larger response in the patellar reflex, and that's what this image is here. He's clenching his fingers and pulling his hands apart while the physician taps on the patellar tendon, and even if he would normally have just a very small response, this will make a larger response. Many reflexes are used clinically as diagnostic tools. One of these is the Babinski sign. This is done by stroking the bottom of the foot. In infants younger than 2, the toes should flare out. In an adult or a child over 2, the toes should curl in, called plantar flexion. If the toes flare out in that adult or child over 2, this could be a sign of a central nervous system injury. See how in this top picture the baby's toes are flaring out, but here in the adult the toes are curling in, so that plantar flexion. Another reflex is the abdominal reflex. Stroking the skin of the abdomen will cause the belly button to move toward the stimulus. If this is absent, it could mean damage to the descending tracts of the central nervous system.